I just want to again welcome you all for joining us today. Our session right now is a panel discussion on hazy beer, and I'm going to hand it over to a couple of our Yakima Chief Hops representatives today. We have Steve Thompson and Mark Mueller, and they'll introduce our panel today. So guys, take it away.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Stephen Thompson. I'm the Central Region Sales Manager. I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. And you're here today to view our forum discussion on the secrets of the New England style IPA, how to brew quality and consistent hazy IPAs. I'm also here with Mark.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm the Northwest Regional Sales Manager at Yakima Chief Hops. So similar to position to what Steve does, just different part of the world. I'm based in Bellingham, Washington. My sales territory is Western Canada, Alaska, and Montana. So as you can imagine, I'm not doing too much traveling these days. I'm currently in Yakima today. I'm actually just a door away from our little experimental brewery. So I'm going to be taking notes as well as we're talking about hazy beers. I think we're brewing tomorrow.
We also have with us Jason Thompson from Calusa Brewing, Nico Tonks from Fair State Brewing, and Andrew Schwartz from Modern Times Brewing.
Hey.
Nicole, do you want to cue up the presentation? You want to go to the first slide, please? We'll let Jason kind of take it from here with a little overview of Calusa Brewing.
Okay, sure thing. Hey, I am Jason Thompson, co-founder and head brewer at Calusa Brewing in Sarasota, Florida. We opened about 4.5 years ago with sort of a specialization on hop forward beer, mixed culture beer, and barrel aged beer. Just so happens on our opening day, we opened with Citronius, just a 100% hazy IPA. One of the first breweries in Florida doing that style. And fast forward 4 years, it makes up, I'd say, 60 to 70% of our volume, just hazy IPA in general. So we've kind of thrown a lot at developing our hazy IPA program in general, and I think have come pretty far with it. And happy to be here today to answer any questions.
All right, I'm up next. My name is Nico. I am the head brewer, also co-founder at Fair State. Let's see, we just cracked through our 6th anniversary, actually, Labor Day of 2014. When we first started out, I sort of begrudgingly made IPAs. So I was a real stick in the mud, contrarian type. I really like brewing lagers, make a lot of sour beers. But since, let's see, 2017, we've really leaned into the hazy IPA thing. I actually have Andrew to thank for knocking me off the fence on this. And the beer I was going to talk a little bit about is Mirror Universe, which is the hazy IPA that we make the most of. It's the let's see, we do 2 of them year round, but it's the one that we do the most of, and it's sort of in the classic mold of twice dry hopped Haze-Bro beers. So I guess we'll talk a little bit more about like our individual processes when we get into it, but there's a lot of information on this slide about this particular beer. Just actually, it's funny. You can tell there's already some similarities between this one and the beer that Jason was talking about. One of the things that we have really invested a lot of time and energy in is figuring out how best to leverage cryo. We use a lot of cryo products in the bulk of our hazy IPAs, especially Mirror Universe, sits right around 50% cryo usage, if you think of it as its sort of T90 equivalent. Yeah, and it's a thing that we spend an awful lot of time and energy thinking about how to really convey the hop impression that we're looking for in beers consistently, especially these days with how many like individual different beers get released on short time frames. So yeah, that's it for me for now.
Okay, am I up? My name is Andrew Schwartz, Commissioner of Flavor here at Modern Times Beer. We are an employee-owned company in San Diego, California, and we make a lot of different beers. It's nice that everyone has their recipe up. I did not do that, but we make a lot of different hazy beer now. It's really taking over a lot of our releases. But we also make a lot of different types. So this lineup that you see in front of you here is kind of our distribution seasonal lineup that takes into many different malt bills, many different ABVs and hoppings, different hops that we use. So it's been a really fun project to kind of like work with that and make things that are slightly different but in the same vein. And there's a lot to talk about there, but Hazy IPA, I mean, IPA has always been big for us. 7 years ago, we weren't really making anything too hazy unless it was naturally hazy, but we started to kind of like come around to it and change our process. And Orderville, which is one of our core IPAs at this point, hazy IPAs at this point, is something I'll talk a lot about because it uses a lot of different hop products, uses some a lot of pellet, different unique hops, and then also some distilled oil as well that we use in the hop extract, distilled oil that we use in the dry hop. So yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about this with everyone. And yeah, we did teach Nico everything he knows about beer, about hazy beer. No, I'm just kidding. But Nico,
I've returned the favor on Grodzitsky and other things. So
yeah, I know. Fair State has always been a big partner with ours and we've traded ideas and concepts back and forth. And when we were like, "What's a Pilsner?" He's like, "What's a hazy IPA?" So it's been a good partnership. We've had a lot to do with a lot of our favorite beers. So thank you, Nico.
Oh no, feelings mutual.
And YCH has too. So thanks YCH too for giving us such good hops.
Well, we really appreciate that as well. Let's just start out with a very basic question. What do you all think makes a hazy IPA different from a traditional IPA?
Well, I definitely think, just because I was already talking, I'll just keep on chatting. I think that, saying traditional IPA is something I've always had trouble with because it's like, what is that? Is that English IPA? Is it West Coast IPA? Is it the stuff that I was brewing when I lived in New York IPA? So it's always been an evolution. And now we've looked at hazy IPA as something that's like a line in the sand for some people, to be like, I'm not going to brew that, or I don't believe in it, or whatever. I think since I've been brewing 10 plus years ago, making something that was hazy just always meant that it was like going to have a little bit more flavor in it, but maybe be a little less shelf stable or something like that. Obviously, it's taken to an extreme with the amount of kind of stuff that's in a beer, but at this point, we now think of it as a lot of flavor and interaction between hops and protein compounds. So, what makes it different? I mean, the shift that we saw was like reevaluating our entire process and saying, how can we get as much hops into this beer as possible? And also, the big shift for us was that people were excited to buy this direct to consumer instead of just distributed. So beer was generally mostly distributed. That affected the cost of goods that you could put in a beer, the pricing that you could sell to the distributor. Once we started to see that shift to tasting room and to in-person model, we were able to change how we hopped and the hop products that we could use and the amount of hops that we could use. So that was a big shift for me, but that's not exactly it's not the full story, but yeah, I'm done talking.
Yeah, so for us, we unfortunately in Minnesota, our ability to sell directly to people is actually really limited because we can't sell cans directly to people. So this is when we were first getting into the hazy game, it was a fun discussion with the Modern Times guys about like, well, so like 7-8 pounds per barrel, it's no problem. I was like, well, let me run the numbers for you, fellas, because we're not going to be around for very long. So for us, like what, how we differentiate it. So I think it's an excellent point. Like IPA is on a spectrum, and the whole thing about craft beer being, built on semi-invented or invented traditions is well taken. And I think when we look at these beers just from like a very simple sensory standpoint, obviously there's the physical appearance, which we've already gotten a question about how do we get stable haze. It's an excellent question. And then also just emphasis on getting the mouthfeel right, the bitterness at the right point, not nothing, but lower than maybe it would have been otherwise. And then really, really just trying to punch you in the face with the aromatics. But even within that, we've managed to branch out where we, we're making beers that we're really trying to lean into a very soft sort of experience, and some that are much more intense. And it's all sort of under this umbrella now of hazy IPAs.
And just to kind of add to that, maybe the difference in more of like a philosophical kind of look at it is, hop forward beer has always been sort of one of the more popular styles, but the big difference for me is, the most popular previously to hazy IPA was West Coast IPA, which was sort of dry, bitter, and hop forward in a way that was like piney or resinous. And the pendulum in trends kind of swings, and it's with hazy IPA, it's a little bit sweeter, it's a little bit more fruit-driven aromatics and flavor, and although there is some bitterness, it's not quite as aggressive as West Coast IPA used to be. So in a more of a philosophical way, it kind of makes sense. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of ways, process-wise, brewing-wise, to get those different results, but conceptually, that's kind of how I look at it.
Steve, do you want us to just start jumping into like the questions we're getting, or should we stick to our sort of basic stuff first?
I think we should address the questions that we're getting. You guys want to kind of start with the first one is stable haze for package distribution, tips, tricks, or concerns?
Yeah, so this is a thing that we have spent an awful lot of time on, and with pretty good luck. I think that a lot of the time there's this conception that hazy beers are just yeast that nobody's dealt with, and it's it's lazy, and you're just like ramming it through as fast as you can, and it'll all flock out in a can and look like garbage later. And there are still some unanswered questions, I think, about the exact mechanisms, and I look forward to more scholarship on this. But from our perspective, it seems pretty clearly to be a protein polyphenol haze. It's not yeast that's hanging around. We centrifuge the beers. Obviously, we're not filtering them beyond that, but based on our cell counting after the fact, it's certainly not yeast that's creating haze in package. And we're really trying to push. Obviously, the grain bill has a lot to do with it. So we're looking for a higher protein percentage just sort of across the board, however you end up getting to that. But really, I think it's the massive dry hopping. With that, you're really introducing a whole bunch of polyphenols that way. It's going to help. And then the last thing is, I think that it gets thrown around a lot that calcium chloride, super important for mouthfeel and impression. This is like an unproven theory that I have. But it seems that there are certain yeast strains, and it may be indexed also with ability to do biotransformation, that under a certain calcium load, I really don't think it's the chloride, I think it's the calcium load, do a better job. Well, I guess from a classical brewing perspective, they would do a worse job, but a better job of setting this protein polyphenol haze that is actually remarkably stable. So we do sensory on downstream cans, 90, 120 days in. Typically, at least on Mirror Universe, we don't see noticeable haze degradation. We're getting other issues, obviously, from having IPA sitting around for that long. But we've never had to we've never had to pull a batch because we were concerned about the visual aspect. And those are just the variables that we try to control for. I don't know if you guys do anything different.
I'd say our process is pretty similar to yours. We're centrifuging our beer as well, in an attempt to try to clarify them a little bit more, but also pull out some polyphenol astringency. Sort of anecdotally, the biggest thing that we did in our brew house to increase like a stable haze was malted wheat in the grist. Our first year brewing Hazy IPA back in 2014, we were just using oats to about 20%, and it would settle out. They would drop pretty bright 3 or 4 months in the can, and then we started adding Wireman malted wheat, and instantly the haze character became much more shelf stable. Dry hop rates, whirlpool rates were all about the same. Obviously anecdotal, but a little bit of some of the more recent studies that have come out kind of show that wheat, but malted wheat in particular, tends to really help create that protein polyphenol bind.
Yeah, I think something that we found was really just a look at our entire process and re-examining what we were doing. One of the things that we did that was like kind of we didn't realize was that we were using a little bit of whirlflock in our whirlpool just in general, and then we later found that that was probably having a negative effect on stable haze. And it was like just a little thing that we were doing in some beers, but not in others. That was kind of a like a vestigial process. But you know, we tend to use, you know, about 20% like kind of higher protein malts, and then getting that dry hop load over about 3 pounds per barrel, you know, is like really key for us to hit that hazy kind of look. And some beers are hazier than others, and I think Nico's right. There's definitely something to do with minerality, but it's, yeah, I don't know. We don't run into that issue so much anymore. We ran into it like one time recently, and we were kind of stunned, but like everything just dropped clear. But we were like, what happened here? But generally we don't. So that was a weird one. I shouldn't have brought it up because we still don't know what happened.
Explain yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. We haven't done this. I'm not sure I have you know, now that Hazy IPA is sort of it's like a mainstream thing. Like, if there are things that produce predictable results that don't have negative flavor impacts, I'm not sure I'm like opposed to them morally. But you know, I know some people do like just pectin straight up. Like, if you don't want to mess around with multiple yeast strains and it's just really important that you have haze, like pectin is a great way to set haze. I've never done it, but I know that it does happen out there.
Yeah, and another one is like, you know, it definitely, when you look at larger breweries, and I don't know that anyone's necessarily doing this, but using some pectin or polysaccharide compound that creates creates a stable, like it's created to create stable haze. I think that's how some of these breweries are getting it. It's more of a look than anything. But I mean, part of that is just there's two things. There's the look, there's the haze, of course, but then also there's like the soft mouthfeel and like the fruitier flavors and less bitterness and things like that. So there's a combination there of things.
Yeah.
So a question up here that's addressed to me, I'll try to answer pretty quickly. So regarding whirlpool utilization and lower temperatures, I've been kind of playing around with that for probably 8 years. And on Citronia specifically, we drop that whirlpool down to about 155 and do some pretty large whirlpool. I think on that guy, it's almost 2 pounds per barrel. And we've seen basically what would be a typical whirlpool addition at say 210. We're getting about 15% of that IBU contribution at 150. So of a typical whirlpool addition, we're getting 15% as much IBU at 155. Sort of backed up by some lab testing as well. it's kind of hard to say specifically because there's no hard data, but we typically see what would normally be about 60 IBUs. If we did it at 210 is typically about 20. I don't know if you guys have played around with low temp whirlpools at all.
We certainly have. Our whirlpool loading is much lower typically. We're right around a half pound per barrel in the whirlpool. So for us at that load, it hasn't really made a huge difference. And that has, for us, it has a lot to do with the way the brew house is configured. A half pound per barrel in our whirlpool allows us to really max out the amount of work we get out of the whirlpool. Since it's a flat bottom, anything less than that, we're actually leaving work behind. Anything more than that, and we're running the risk of running over the dam. So that 0.5, 0.6 pounds per barrel just for us has really settled in as like an equipment dialing in issue. We'll change the variety, but the vast majority of these beers have a pretty much static whirlpool load. And then Chris, by the way, hi Chris. I assume it's the same Chris Stratman I know. We don't really bother calculating IBUs, frankly.
Yeah, we reduced the, we experimented a few times with whirlpool and doing big increases big whirlpool loads. We had an issue there with just the same thing that Nico's talking about, just like massive loss or not being able to get work out of the whirlpool in our San Diego brewing facility. And we found that we just get so much more impact on the dry hop, so we focus on that. And do like about a pound per barrel whirlpool dry hop. But we do reduce the temp too, because we will see that as it sits in there and whirlpools, like we'll get a lot of bitterness. IBU testing is interesting. We can't really do it when our in-house IBU testing for Hazy IPA at least is always off the charts. It's super high, and that just comes from dry hopping or whatever. It's like the beers do not taste that bitter, but they'll the IBU test that we do with a spectrophotometer isn't really functional with that amount of dry hop.
Yeah, I've seen some similar studies that are showing that HPLC can kind of differentiate the individual hop oils and do a slightly better job at IBU, but at least as it refers to the low temp whirlpool, it's still sort of isomerized and kind of comes through. An interesting thing that I've kind of been experimenting with on the low temp whirlpools, which I'd say 50% of our hazy IPAs are done that way. And I kind of see a similar loss to dry hopping. So if we're doing a really big low temp whirlpool, we're just pulling a little bit of the dry hop into the whirlpool. But I kind of have this theory, I don't know if it's correct or not, but some of the hop enzymes that are leading to hop creep and dry hop, I feel like we're able to get those enzymes in on that low temp whirlpool without denaturing them. And it's kind of allowing us to reduce the hop creep that we would see from some really big dry hop loads without having to have the contact time of like a mid ferment dry hop. So we were kind of doing low temp whirlpools and mid ferment dry hop and then post ferment dry hop. And as I've increased the hop load of low temp whirlpool, I've kind of pulled out some of those mid ferment dry hops just in an effort to have as little contact time with all that vegetal matter that we need. So
and how low are you seeing your beers ferment to for something like that, gravity wise?
So we would before we were, or on beers where I don't do like a low temp whirlpool, we'll see like a 1 Plato drop after dry hop, whereas on the low temp whirlpool, we don't see a drop post dry hop. So we're using London L3, and we typically see anywhere between 75 to 80% attenuation, depending on the grist and what we match at.
Right. No, it's interesting that the hop creep, the hop re-fermentation that we've seen has been we basically tried to reduce the amount of yeast that's in solution and then dry hop post fermentation for a very short contact time, and try and basically not get any of that re-fermentation. But I saw, Nico, that you guys, you are dry hopping during fermentation.
Yeah.
Still?
So we actually,
there's some breweries doing that. I'm very interested in that, because we tried it out and we couldn't get good results. But it's
for us, I don't know. This is actually a thing that I've been working on with Spencer at YCH, is trying to really nail down the effects of potential biotransformation. And they're minor, but I think that there's some supposition that we're able to volatilize maybe like some excess myrcene or things that we might not want. If we are dry hopping at least a little bit before terminal gravity, especially with stuff like so we just did a trial with HBC6. Oh, sorry, it's Talus now. With the Neomax aspects of it, that the woodiness it was a little bit easier to mitigate if we did have a bit of fermentation happening after the fact. I will say, from a process standpoint, it's really difficult to make a ton of Mirror Universe if it's double dry hopped, because we are, we do end up in a position where we have to harvest yeast before terminal. And so this is actually a question that someone gave in here, like, how do we deal with yeast? So I guess I'm answering this right now. It's a real son of a bitch if you're dry hopping during fermentation. So we basically have built a number of beers, not expressly for this reason, but for other reasons as well, that just do have a single terminal dry hop, and we're able to maintain haze in those beers as well too, and get what we need. But yeah, for Mirror Universe, the first dry hop is all cryo, and it goes in at 5-6 Plato, and it seems to set the character that we want to get out of the mosaic. It's all mosaic at that point, a little bit better. So for us, if we're saying something's double dry hop, for us, almost always that first dry hop is going in during the tail end of active fermentation.
Hey guys, we had a question that kind of relates to this, just for those that aren't aware. Can you explain what hop creep is?
Oh, sure. I mean, I guess I could do it because I was just talking, but the idea is that you would be, with higher dry hop loads, you would actually experience some post dry hop fermentation that you hadn't anticipated. The idea being that hops actually contain some enzymes that would be able to cleave sugars in a way that actually would allow yeast to access them and to ferment. And so there's a number of different potential issues. One is like literally just over fermentation, right? So if you want to end at 3 Plato, oh, I've got this hop creep problem and I'm at 1.8, and all of a sudden the whole profile of this beer is off. In more subtle and pernicious ways also, sometimes you might get, sorry, big words. You might get a tiny bit of fermentation where yeast is kicking off VDKs, where it's making more diacetyl, but you did a force test, you're like, oh cool, I passed. You dry hop the beer, maybe it creeps 1/10 of a Plato, and so you're like, oh, everything's fine, but you don't do another force test at the end. Lo and behold, yeast has produced a bunch of VDKs, you crash it, oops, you've got a diacetyl bomb once you temp cycle a couple times. So it can be a very difficult thing to handle. From our perspective, my approach to hop creep most of the times is that I'm just going to build it into the recipe. So yeah, we plan for it and we adjust on the hot side. We mash a little hotter if we need to. There have been certain times, certain hop varieties may have more enzymatic action than others. We're employing something like maltodextrin or only a marginally fermentable sugar to ensure that you're ending where you want to is another way to go. I don't know how you guys are dealing with hop creep. Well, I guess, Andrew, I know a little bit. You talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're definitely, we're trying to not have it, right? And we're doing that, like, we try not to like mash too high or add maltodextrin, because we found that like maltodextrin just like gets ripped up by hop enzyme hop creep, like immediately drops down in our experience. But it's like, but we've just tried to like basically be like, when is there no VDK? And the way that or no diacetyl present in sensory, and the way we found best is just like short contact time dry hops and not allowing it to get on the hops. It's one thing to have like like hop creep, but the thing that we want to avoid, especially in like production sense, is that kind of like long-term re-fermentation thing where it's just like low levels of diacetyl and they never really clean up, and it's just like, you know, slowly creeping down. A little bit like a vigorous hop creep, which vigorous re-fermentation. Hop re-fermentation isn't really a problem, as long as it's happening like during fermentation, which is why I mean, it's interesting that you guys dry hop with cryo during fermentation. I think that's like a really good idea. And then also it's interesting to think about like having all those enzymes present, you know, from your whirlpool. I think that's a really interesting way to handle it. But yeah, you know, that's been something that we kind of struggled with for a while, was that we wanted to make some beers finish a little bit higher. We found that like if we dry hop them at like, you know, 8 pounds per barrel or 6 to 8 pounds per barrel, and they were finishing a little bit higher, it just gave this really great juiciness, with, you know, with a lot of ABV as well. And we were just having trouble like staying at that FG and, you know, like 6 Plato or something like that finishing. So it was just for a couple, you know, trials here and there, but like we had some trouble with that. So like, but it's actually been nice. So we found like, you know, there's more of a balance between alcohol and ester and hopping and final gravity that we've found to be a little bit better, that we're like a little bit happier with, lower than that. So it's been an interesting kind of experiment to get into. It's funny though, because like when you first start making these beers, like Hazy IPA, you know, whatever, changing your IPA process, we never thought that this would be like a major issue. We're like, just put more hops in. Like, what's that problem? What's going to happen there? No issues here. But yeah, I don't know. It's like all the things that we talk about. You're like, oh, we just wanted to make something with like oats and more hops. You know, I don't know.
Hey, Andrew, you actually touched on something that I was wanting to ask all of you, and that's dry hop contact time. So I guess, first of all, when you say short contact time, I'm curious to have you define that, but also I'm curious just to have all of you kind of talk a little bit about, yeah, what your feelings are on what a good contact time is, if it's product dependent, variety dependent, those sort of topics.
Guess I'll pop in on this one real quick. We prefer short contact time as well with our dry hop, pretty much no more than 48 hours. I think part of that is we recirc our tanks as we dry hop. We're not using like a hop rocket or a hop cannon. We'll set up a recirc loop on the tank and physically pour the hops in the top, just like you would with a kind of traditional style. But instead of rousing with CO2, which I've found works well, but we had some inconsistencies. We noticed we were getting big, especially with really big dry hops, like 5, 6, 7 pounds per barrel. We would get like a literal hop island sitting on top of the beer that just wouldn't get into solution. And, you know, we've started recircing the tanks. We'll give it little rouses with CO2 to get it all into suspension. And then a really short recirculation with a pump of 2 to 4 hours. And then I'll just let it sit for a day or two after that. Just if there is any, you know, bioconversion, hop creep, any of that happening, just to kind of clear up. And then if it passes VDK, we crash it down and start dropping hops. So one of the things that I noticed with doing a lot of mid-fermentation dry hop was we get great hop character, and I can't say that I've noticed any sensory difference from like bioconversion or biotransformation necessarily. The bigger thing that I did notice was shorter contact times led to significantly less like sulfurous compounds like dank, onion, garlic, just kind of sulfury in general, vegetal. The longer we're on the hops or the longer they're in solution, the more we start to pull that character out.
Yeah, we a lot of our beers do end up sitting on hops for a little bit longer because of the fact that we do tend to employ at least a little bit of mid-firm dry hop on a lot of things. You know, our terminal dry hop period is 48 hours. We aim for. That does mean that first dry hop load is probably going to sit in there for 4 days, potentially even 5, you know, if things are going a little slower than we want them to. We'd like to avoid that. But part of this is part of why we have ended up using so much cryo. I really liked the character of doing a little bit of fermentation on those cryo pellets, especially with Mosaic. And I think that, you know, a lot of this is varieties dependent, and a lot of it is also just lot dependent. So now that we finally are, you know, we're doing selection, we're able to account for these things a little bit better, which is great. But you know, being able to use those concentrated pellets and have the cryo in there for a little bit longer has positive downstream effects for us. We don't see as much of that sort of vegetal, kind of astringent, nasty, like long dry hop stuff that you would want to avoid with those, which is how we ended up on that process. We don't do any like post dry hop active recirculation of tanks. So this could be another thing too, where we're getting really good contact on that stuff that we're getting in at 5 Play-Doh, where things are mixing, you know, very, very well at that point. The second one, you know, we'll either do a little bubble depending on where it is, or if it's a little bit lighter, it might just be like an old school static dry hop. And I think this might, you know, some of it is superstition on my part, but I don't like chopping beer up. So like a short pump recirc is great, but like a lot of this where it's like sitting for a long time and spinning, and you know, it's like, it just freaks me out because I feel like it's rough. Yes, you might get some marginal benefit on hop aroma, but I feel like it has other negative impacts on beers. For us anyway, it has in the past. So again, I think we're just trying to keep it simple. But this is a thing that we discussed a lot, especially doing some trial work with YCH this year, is contact time, and how a lot of beers are creeping longer and longer, where, you know, if you'd asked me 5-6 years ago whether it'd be okay to have beer sit on dry hop for 5 days, I would have been really freaked out by that. So it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's we were always like looking at how long to leave things. I mean, we experimented with some really long dry hops for a while, and we got some good results, but then we found that that a lot of times we were just getting kind of vegetal and flavors that we didn't love for long dry hops. I mean, I think the cryo is quite different, and we don't use as much of it as it sounds like Nico does. But when we talk about short dry hopping, we're like, you know, 24, 48 hours dry hop before, you know, and then, like I said, like dry hopping and then getting to a point where it's like VDK crash as soon as possible, just so that we're not seeing re-fermentation. But yeah, we have 4 different brewing facilities, so we're able to kind of experiment with different places and how we do the process and every facility is different. That has both positive and negative aspects to it. So we're like, oh, this worked here, but can we replicate it in San Diego? You know, that the same process that worked in LA or whatever. And it's not always the case, but yeah, our contact time has definitely become shorter because we just find that you get like much more of like a brighter hop character, and the intensity is generally there too. Something that we were really concerned about was intensity, and that's why we were recircing and stuff at first, was to kind of get that intensity of those hops into the beer. But even dry hopping through the top port, you at 4 pounds per barrel, you know, you still get a lot of hop character in those beers. So for us, there's definitely some production and, you know, technical constraints, those being like making sure that you're not getting hop re-fermentation and diacetyl and all that. But we've been generally enjoying the beers as well that are being dry hopped for less time. It's interesting because some of my favorite beers, or at least one beer that I can remember, we dry hopped with Mosaic for like 7 days or something, that we were just like keeping it warm and rousing it, and we loved this beer, but we could never replicate that character in a way. So it was like the lot or whatever, and I don't know. And we just found that we would just end up getting just as good results with a short dry hop.
Okay. So, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No problem. Not to reference a YCH competitor or anything, but Hopsteiner has done some HPLC testing on dry hop and hop oil versus contact time, and pretty interesting results. But I think overall they found that regardless of agitation method or just leaving it still, that pretty much all the hop oils were getting pulled out in the first 48 hours, some as fast as 24. So I think, there's so little scientific proof for a lot of the stuff, but it does kind of line up with what I think all three of us anecdotally are experiencing.
Yeah, I've read a similar article, I think from Shellhammer's lab at Oregon State, that was talking about a similar trial with similar results to what you guys are talking about. But it's kind of nice to get some confirmation from several other brewers as well. There's a good question here also about hop burn and just managing hop burn. I think that kind of dovetails nicely into how you guys dry hop. So I'm curious to ask you guys, how have you managed that? And again, just like relating that to the various products that you've played around with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of hop burn for a while that we would find would be pleasant after some amount of time. And depending on the customer and the consumer that's drinking them, like some people were like, oh, like gonna give this one a week, like that's okay with me. And a lot of people were like, this tastes like bitter and off-putting. And we found that like we just wanted to kind of reduce the hop burn overall. So dry hop time was definitely part of that. And then our centrifuge process was another aspect of it. But we try and give it a lot of time in cold. So once it's crashed, and then once it's in the bright tank, if we can, give it some time and allow it to kind of rest and sit. But that's, if we crashed it and then 24 hours later transferred it, we would get more hop burn, which we just found is like probably hop particulate in the final product.
Yeah. Yeah, we've kind of dealt with it in sort of 3 stages. Initially, it was just cold maturation time. Sometimes it took 10 days to even smooth out. And then experimented with biofining our Hazy IPA. We were using a half dose of biofine, maintaining our haze character, and that sped things up a little bit. We were able to go from a week on average of cold conditioning time between the FV and the bright tank. And with biofine, basically getting similar results in 3 to 4 days. And then finally, as of about a year ago, we got a centrifuge, and that's helped out a ton. We're able to strip out all yeast and hop particulate while maintaining some haze character, and it's smoothed the beers out considerably.
Yeah,
we haven't done biofine. When we tried biofine a few times, it kind of like crashed a lot of stuff out, but we haven't done like a small dose of it. Interesting.
I've never done biofine on one of these. I mean, I think, what we do is very similar, where the centrifuge is a key element. If you don't have a centrifuge, I mean, they're expensive. And so yeah, the fuge for us has been huge. I mean, we can crash, let it sit for 36, 48 hours, run it through the fuge the way that we do for hazy beers. And then we feel pretty much good to go. Whereas before, as Andrew was saying, I think especially like sometime in the bright tank really seemed to help. That, if we can give it a couple days in the bright tank, even that'll really help. But honestly, for packaged beer, especially beer that's going into distribution, it doesn't seem that putting it in a can with 10%, doesn't really seem. It's like the old trick of you could just lager in the kegs, if you need to. That if we can if the beer is like 8 or 10 days old when it lands on the shelf and somebody picks it up, and that at 8 or 10 days old, it is like nailing where we want it to be, then that's the sort of thing that we can build into, knowing what our distribution network looks like, that we could actually build in a little bit. We do have 2 breweries as well. And at the small brewery, the little 7-barrel, we don't have any filtration, anything at all whatsoever. And so I rely on time, time and good cellar practice, like really just making sure that I'm getting the beer off the hops, like every day. I'm just dumping the cone, I'm pretending like I'm a good little lager brewer. And then building in like a number of days in the bright tank as well. The other thing, frankly, for beers like that for me, the beers that aren't going into distribution, if I'm getting excess hop burn on that small scale stuff, a tool that is also in the toolkit there is just dialing back on the dry hops a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
So if it's got a short time to live, people are going to drink it quickly, and I get the same sensory experience out of it by knocking a pound or a pound and a half out of the dry hop, and I can cut all that out, then like everybody wins. You know, that only works for certain beers, but you know, it's more is not always more.
That's exactly what we've been finding too, is like that, those massive numbers in dry hops, we're like, are we getting much out of that? You know, like we're seeing some real intensity on some of these dry hops at 4 pounds per barrel, and like, and 6 for like double dry hop stuff or whatever, but it's like going much above that. Is that really necessary? Or even sometimes just a little bit above 4, and you do reduce that hop burn. I thought the same exact thing. That's good. It's good. Yeah, but I don't know. We don't really get that much. The hop burn has been reduced for us for a while, and I think that's mainly been just good cellar practices, understanding when these beers taste good, and treating them like, I mean, we really do treat these beers really well, and you know, everything from like low carbonation and low DOs and transferring and all that. It's like they are kind of similar to lagers in that, I don't know what I'm talking about. They're not really similar to lagers, but they have like a softness, and they kind of like, you know, that's part of it. That's what we want them to taste like, is like be really drinkable, be, you know, really fruity and just soft and nice.
I think that, you know, maybe a nugget in there is that sometimes there is a perception that hazy beers are lazy and they're just ripped off fast, and it's like any idiot could make this. But I really think the difference, you know, as with all beers, right? The difference between good and great is intentionality and thinking about it, and good cellar practice and good hot side practice, good packaging practice, and just taking the whole thing seriously and not hiding behind the fact that you have a 5, 6, 7 pound per barrel dry hop in there that can obscure issues.
I think that was like that was the fun thing when people started making hazy beers, and people are like, they're shit. They're all, or sorry, can we swear? They're like, they're crappy. And I don't like those and everything. It's like, and it's bad cellar practices. And it's like, no, like we learned a lot about our process. And a lot of other breweries that were making really good really good beers also made really, really high quality, hoppy, like very aromatic beers. And you're like, these are not bad brewing practices that have created this beer. So I think when people were originally getting kind of upset about hazy beer, they would say, you know, it's poor brewing practices, and that's why it's hazy. And I mean, there were examples of that, of course. There's still examples of bad West Coast IPA and bad hazy beer and all that stuff. But breweries that are doing it good, like are getting really aromatic, really clean flavors and aromas and stuff like that. So and I think that hop suppliers are also probably stoked on it too, because, you know, the showcase of the hops is just so intense, and it's even more than it was with West Coast beers. I think, you know, like you just get these crazy flavors and aromas.
I guess a follow-up to the pounds per barrel, there's a question in here, what are the normal losses on a New England IPA?
I'll go. I mean, I think for us, as with any other beer, like loss is higher, right? It's an IPA. You know, you put a lot of hops in, you're going to lose more beer. For us, dialing in loss has definitely been an equipment dependent thing. So, like as I said with the Whirlpool, you know, the losses that we would incur from that massive hot side loading were really hurting us. And so when we dialed that in, then, you know, the losses downstream turns out weren't as bad as we thought. Like what Jason was saying, you know, maybe for them, it's like if you can pull it out here and put it in there, it is what it is. So for us, it was just trial and error to really nail down, you know, where our issues were and how to mitigate them. So, you know, and if it comes down to us, like chunking another 100 pounds of 2-row in from the silo to really, really max out that kettle yield, that's what we're going to do. So we run 90 barrel batches, and we're routinely seeing on Mirror Universe, routinely seeing yields into the bright tank, like 83, 84 barrels. So, you know, it's possible to work around. I wouldn't accept as as a precondition that if you're making hazy beers with lots of hops in them, that you're going to be yielding 50% or some nonsense.
And but you're also saying too that like, you know, reducing those hops and getting like, I think in the beginning we saw more losses because we were just like loading it up with hops like constantly.
Yeah,
and then
if you're going crazy.
Yeah. And now it's like, now you start to like refine it a little bit, and yeah, that's what we've seen too. But yeah, our losses are like, if we have time to let it chill in the FV or the bright, or not, well, not in the bright, but in the FV before transferring it, we have better yield, let everything settle.
Yeah, I'm just kind of echoing what you guys said. You know, definitely the losses are worse than like a lager or something. But if we give it 2 or 3 days in the fermenter before centrifuging, we're typically anywhere between 12 to 15% loss. So it's not really a whole lot different than like a West Coast IPA or, you know, whatever you want to call it, a traditional, or, you know, it's hops are just going to absorb some liquid, and that's just kind of comes with the territory.
What kind of hops do they like in Florida?
I'm sorry?
What kind of hops do they like in Florida? What's everyone's favorite?
Citra, Mosaic, you know, the usuals, I think.
San Diego has a soft spot for Nelson, so it's like that's always been a thing for us, other than those ones.
We're like a Columbus Cryo. That's, you know, that's the big one.
I really got to use that stuff, that Columbus Cryo.
Yeah. Plug for Columbus Cryo, please.
We got to do that in that juice box collab.
Yeah. Say no more.
I won't. Yeah. What are you guys like? So there is a question here about consumer preference, and I think it's interesting because we don't have enough. We haven't changed anything massively to like, you know, to switch things over like in any one way or another. We make a lot of different styles of beer and IPA, but with everyone kind of being at home, we kind of think people are drinking more like beers instead of like flights. And, you know, just instead of having like the flights and going to the tasting room and trying stuff and wanting that really big intensity, and maybe wanting something that they can consume like a whole can of, you know, in a way. I don't know. It's been kind of different. So we do think that there's kind of that there is a slight trend towards like drier and a little bit more like, you know, lower ABV beers and things like that. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
That would be wonderful. I mean, I would love that.
By lower ABV, I mean like 7.5 instead of 8.5.
Well, yeah, man. We still make 6% IPAs. Deal with it.
That's un-American.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
yeah. No, go ahead.
we've definitely seen a little bit of a shift towards, I guess, drinkability, you know, over the whole pandemic situation. But just in general with regarding hazy IPA, the better that we've done at smoothing the beers out has definitely been a positive increase overall. And like extreme and crazy flavors and everything is a lot of fun, but I think one of the best aspects of beer historically and just in general is it's more drinkable. You know, like I like quaffing large volumes of beer personally, and I think that's what makes it fun. So
yeah, 100% agree. Every beer that we make, I would, you know, we try to keep that in mind. Sometimes you lose it, right? You know, it's like, oh, this is a 12% pastry stout, and it's not medically advisable for you to drink multiple 16-ounce cans of this. But you know, especially on IPAs, like, yeah, I would always want to have a second one. You know what I mean?
That's why you make 12% seltzer cocktails.
I want to have 4 of those. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I you know what I love is like I really have been in love with like noble hop character. I love noble hops. I'm so obsessed with them. It's like, and I mean Pilsner's obviously, you know, put, you know, in there, but it's God, such unique flavors, you know, such unique aromas there.
Have you guys had good luck playing around with like the sort of new school, like, you know, the Germans get into growing oddball American? Like, how's that going for you?
We just did something. We smelled some mandarina that was really nice, that we've done some stuff with. But we haven't had the best luck with it because you do get a little bit more of that herbal sometimes, and it just doesn't play well with like, you know, like the hazy kind of fruity thing. But you know, the thing that we're really excited about too is that, and you know, different suppliers, different growers, but just kind of USDA varieties, crystal, cashmere, like they can be really, really, really cool. You get them from some different growers and stuff like that. They're not star hops. I mean, they're not Simcoe Mosaic. YCH isn't paying me for this either, so I guess, you know, we don't have to.
No, Columbus Cryo and Crystal. Those are some of my, like, we had a lot of fun playing around with Autonum last year, like super good results. And especially with the cryo version, just like, you know, lemon bombs, like these characteristics that I totally love and that are really good, like blending kind of like general elevating components, you know?
Autonum is so cool. It's such an interesting story too, like gone and it just came back. And it's like, I mean, I would love to play around with Autonum more. I used to love that hop. I guess we're just all waiting for Sriracha Ace to come back around and get a star.
I'm fine.
Hey guys, let's try to, we're approaching the hour. Let's kind of go through the question list and see if we can answer any of the remaining ones.
Go
ahead, Nico.
Lightning round.
I just said lightning round. We're gonna go fast.
We each like answering one question.
Yeah, however you guys want to approach it.
Okay, ready, Jason?
Yeah.
Actually, this may be more of a Nico question, but you can answer it too. But contributions, advantages of using a spunding valve?
I wouldn't do it on IPA until after you dry hop shit, because that's how you end up with geysers. I love spooning valve. I love natural carbonation, but for IPAs, I do not attempt to capture any of it until all of the hops are in the tank. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
okay.
I do the same. We don't use a spunding valve. We just cap the tank when we add dry hop, and then from that point forward, it stays sealed up the entire time.
Yeah, spun it all. Only natural carbonation, right? No, we can't. We can only be so lucky. Jason, have you reduced or eliminated boil time to maximize protein content in the fermenter?
No, we typically do at least a 60-minute boil. I just get worried about DMS and stuff like that from shortened boils, especially if we're using a fair amount of Pilsner. So, and it kind of works with our double batch schedule. So it's just easier to keep it flowing that way.
And what would a low temperature whirlpool be for you guys? How low do you go?
Anywhere between 150 and 180. We target the lower end just because it picks up less IBU.
When we've done it, we've done 180, but like I said, typically we don't do it.
Nico, this is a good one. Do you slow crash, do you step crash, or do you drop immediately from firm?
For these beers, we just drop immediately, and that has a lot to do with our plant. You know, our tanks with the run of glycol we have take 24 hours to get all the way down, so no advantage to step crashing it. Also, I mean, like you're just trying to get stuff out with these beers. We step crash lagers. We can talk about that on a different panel.
Well, we tried. So my answer to that is that we tried step crashing, but because I was like, oh, lagers do it. Why don't we do it in this? And I couldn't convince everyone else at this company that it was a good idea. So we stopped doing it. We definitely didn't see advantages.
We hard crash.
You hard crash, not soft crash. Okay. Let's see. Probably one more. Jason, do you use cryo?
Sparingly, yeah, a little bit. It's amazing for getting hop character without vegetal matter, but one of the challenges that we had with it, the first time I used it, I did 100% of the dry hop with cryo, just kind of went balls to the wall. And because there was a lack of plant matter, polyphenol, the beer was crystal clear. Now when we use it, I just use it about 25% of the dry hop.
Yeah, I think we're the same. And then obviously Nico's talked about it, but
like a lot of our beers hit like 50%. It's like between 25 and 50 for the most part, unless we can't get cryo of some variety. And for us, benefits are yield, Flavor stability, frankly, in package seems to be better with cryo. And yeah, definitely you don't want to do 100% cryo. There's all sorts of, you lose a certain je ne sais quoi, even if you're not experiencing haze stability issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this question is about malted oats versus flaked oats. It says everyone's going hard on flaked oats and rolled oats in the United States, but in Europe, people are using malted oats. This person suggests that flaked oats and rolled oats can lead to astringency in the beer with heavy dry hops. I haven't experienced this, so it's kind of an interesting question, but I don't know if you guys have thought about that, malted oats versus flaked oats, what you prefer.
We use malted oats sometimes because for lautering issues, it's, you know, having malted oats is nice. The husks are like super springy and good, so it can help louder things. Typically we're flaked, and I have not noticed astringency differences between flake and malt. And frankly, there's so much husk on malted oats that, like, I would imagine you'd end up with more astringency going that way, but that's just a guess.
Well, we don't have, like, our mill isn't good enough for malted oats. It's like we have to get it like pre-milled.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sub out the flaked oats for malted oats on a few different beers, even a sort of session hazy IPA, and I can't say we've picked up anything, you know, perception-wise that's different.
We have a couple questions from the Huva app, guys. One is, biotransformation really happening during fermentation?
Yeah, sure. I think so.
Yeah, potentially. It depends on the yeast, and it's not going to blow your socks off, but, you know, yeah, it happens.
All right, and last question, this can kind of, whoever, is hazy beer just a trend, or where do you see the style in 1, 3, or 5 years from now?
Well, I'll tell you about biotransformation too, real quick, is that it's not happening during fermentation. It's not happening any other place other than fermentation. I think hazy beer, you know, trend, I don't know, it's as much of a trend as a hoppy beer is a trend. People like American hop flavors and hops that are grown in the United States, and that flavor being expressed in beers. And I think hazy beer is a good place to express those. So I think it'll be around for a while.
Yeah, to a certain extent, everything we do is a trend. I feel like trend sometimes is a dirty word, but you know, yeah. So where's it going? Excellent question. I don't think I have enough time to pontificate on that, but, like, sure, it's a trend. I don't think it's a dirty word.
Oh, you don't think it is? Jason hopes it's not a trend.
Well, I mean, I think it is a trend, and it's probably not going anywhere. Like, I'm sure variations of you know, hazy IPA will be around in 10 years. I don't think it's like black IPA or anything.
Oh, burn on.
Whoa, what's up? Whoa. Yeah, Jason.
You guys heard about Brute IPA? Because that's huge. It's
that would be more of a trend.
Jason, what's your favorite glassware to drink hazy beer out of?
That's a good question. I'm a huge fan of English Nonic pints, just in general. So that's my preferred go-to.
Yep, I like those.
Well, so Minnesota is the land of the IPA bowl. That was a good.
What?
Yeah, dude, those guys that came up with putting your face in a bowl, that's like in Minnetonka.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, hometown pride. I'm gonna go bowl. We don't do bowls, but sure, bowls.
We're a base, you know,
Proper baseware.
Yeah, proper baseware.
Yeah.
I guess that's it. Huh?
Skull vodka bottle. That's probably the best.
Yeah, the bizarre tequila bottles that you can fill with whatever, as long as there's no head on top. That's the goal.
Yeah, inverted light bulb. That's actually the best.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. I think this was a great panel. I think you all did a great job. Thank you, Mark, for helping. And I think we're about ready to wrap this up. Nicole, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, again, I just wanted to thank you all so much for being on our panel and presenting today. We really appreciate your time. It was very valuable information. So again, thank you for that. And just a reminder for everyone, this session was recorded, so we will be posting updated the link here within the hour, and it'll be available on Huva as well as virtualharvest.com. And again, if you have any questions in general, you can email brewschool@yakimachief.com, or if you have specific brewing questions, you can email brewinghelp@yakimachief.com, and those will be directed to the appropriate parties. But again, thank you again all so much. Thank you, Nico, Andrew, Jason, Mark, Steve. You guys were fantastic. Thank you so much for this information, and apologize if we didn't get to everyone's questions. We had quite a few. But again, thank you all so much, and have a great day, and we'll see you on the next session.
Thanks all.